Good afternoon and welcome to the Healthy Habits Eat Well webinar series, taking place every Thursday through April 28th from 12 to 12:50. We're so excited to have you all here with us today and pleased with our turnout. We are expecting over 250 attendees today. I'm Julie Chabdi, Health and Wellbeing Program Manager at the USC WorkWell Center, formerly the Center for Work and Family Life. We will be officially announcing our new name very soon, so stay tuned for that. And it's my pleasure to be with you all today for the next 50 minutes. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. As always, we encourage you to stand if you're able to and stretch anytime during today's presentation. So feel free, get up, move, stretch at any time. Your audio is being muted to minimize background noise until we open it up for Q&A. But feel free to use the chat function to make comments. We encourage you to engage with each other, share ideas, ask questions, and also use the Q&A function. And we'll ensure that the presenters will assist in responding to all the questions at the very end or during their presentation. This webinar is being recorded and will be archived for sharing on the Healthy Habits Eat Well webpage that you used to register for today. So stemming from the success of last year's Healthy Habits webinar series, where we had over 500 registered, we're now doing a spinoff called Healthy Habits Eat Well in honor of National Nutrition Month and collaborating with campus partners across USC. We all know that access and availability of healthy food and beverages plays an important role in our overall health and well-being. The link between diet and health has been well documented in scientific literature for many decades, and there is growing evidence showing that food and beverage environments conducive to healthy dietary patterns can help us achieve and maintain good health and reduce the risk of chronic diseases throughout our life stages. So the purpose of this series is to provide you with tips, resources, and support for ways to improve your health and quality of life through nutrition and healthy eating habits. So here's a look at the 8-week nutrition education program sponsored by the WorkWell Center in partnership with registered dietitians and nutrition experts from Clinical Nutrition at Keck Medicine, Keck School of Medicine, USC Athletics, USC Hospitality, the Leonard Davis School of Gerontology, USC Student Health, and the USC Transplant Institute, Keck Medicine of USC. Today's session is on sorting out popular diets and social media influences on diet culture. We hope you'll join the other sessions as well. For those of you who attend all 8 sessions, we'll be entering you into a raffle to earn a chance at one of many prizes. And for today, stay until the very end where we will raffle off 2 prizes. So let's get started. Today's topic is on sorting out popular diets, which there's quite a bit, and then social media influences on diet culture. Today's agenda will include understanding social media influences on our behaviors, thoughts, and attitudes, and then making healthy eating choices. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our 2 speakers for today. We have Jenny Frucci, Assistant Director of Clinical Nutrition, and Brittany Gurney, Outpatient Dietitian with Keck Medicine of USC. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jenny.
Great. Thank you, Julie. And thank you, everyone, for sharing your time with us today. We're going to go ahead and start with 2 quick Zoom polls. So you should see the polls come up on your screen. Please take a few seconds to respond.
So which of these social media platforms do you use most often? And the answers are flying in. So we'll give it a few more seconds for everyone to think about the answer, and then we'll display the results. We have Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube, or don't use any of the above. So feel free to share. Okay, we have all answers in, and we'll go ahead and share the results for Jenny to talk to.
Okay, great. So it looks like Instagram followed by Facebook are kind of the most common of everyone on the chat on the call. We've got some people who don't use any social media, and most common response was several times a day. Okay, great. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. So how does this kind of compare to US adults on the whole? In 2021, YouTube followed by Facebook were the most widely reported platforms used, with social media users visiting these sites once a day, if not several times a day. So now I'm going to ask you to take a moment to reflect on the next slide. So why do you use social media? Why do you go on social media? What are your motivations? So think about this, and if you feel comfortable, please share in the chat. I'll give you a few seconds to think and to share. And you can click everyone, so your chat's going out to everyone. Need to remember birthdays, see what's going on. Great. Okay, so while more is coming in, we can go to the next slide. See pictures, check in, keep up with everyone. Yeah, so definitely that a lot of that is what I saw in the literature as well. Certainly a way to keep up on everyone, which they call surveillance in the literature. A way to pass time, distract ourselves, procrastinate, escape. A way to self-expression, share your opinion, document what's going on in your life, self-promotion. Yeah, so all of these are things to keep in mind as we keep going. So now that we've reflected on some of the whys, let's layer on and think about what we see and engage with on social media, especially related to nutrition, health, and bodies in general. So ads, they're everywhere on social media. They follow us. They convince us to buy things. I know I've definitely bought things I saw advertised on Instagram. And we know that companies are spending a lot of money on ads to be as persuasive as possible, a projected $62 billion this year in the US. In the nutrition and health space, this can look like ads for health foods, energy drinks, dietary supplements, weight loss products, subscriptions, services, apps, etc. So we also know that we see news and quote unquote news. We know that a lot of US adults get their news from social media, almost 50% in 2021. And we also know that we frequently don't read the whole news article, or sometimes even click on the article at all. We may just read the headline and the brief preview that shows up in our feed. Studies have shown a lot of us share these links without ever clicking on them, and that we're likely to be overconfident in our understanding of the content when we just see the headline and the preview. In terms of nutrition-related news, we know that people see a lot of headlines and articles related to the health effect of foods. In 2016, so a bit dated, but 66% of surveyed US adults reported seeing these at least a few times a week. We also know that these headlines we see can appear conflicting. Coffee is good, coffee is bad. It can feel like the back and forth of a tennis match. We know that headlines are more likely to appear conflicting, however, when they're reporting on individual studies and not on the big picture and the overall conclusions and guidelines that are created based on all of these studies in totality. Headlines too are often to be more conflicting when news outlets are trying to drive clicks. And Brittany's going to touch more later on in the presentation on how to evaluate nutrition info. So the content we see on social media related to nutrition, health, and bodies often has components of one or more of the following. Diet culture, which is characterized by a conflation of weight and health, includes myths about food and eating, as well as a moral hierarchy of bodies. Weight stigma, which refers to the labeling, stereotyping, and indiscrimination of anyone on the basis of weight, and fat shaming, which is any behavior that humiliates someone judged to have excess weight. On the flip side, more and more we may see content relating to body positivity, which aims to challenge dominant appearance ideals and focus on appreciating the functionality and health of the body rather than solely focusing on its appearance. There's also body neutrality, which speaks more to some people. This aims to place less emphasis on physical appearance altogether. You may also see terms like anti-diet, weight inclusive, health at every size, and intuitive eating. I will say that a lot of these concepts, as they enter mainstream social media, can be diluted and twisted. So if you're interested, I definitely recommend doing a deeper dive into these than just making a judgment off of one social media post, for example. And intuitive eating, I definitely recommend you come back in 2 weeks for one of our dietitians to talk more about it in session 6, food and mood and mindful eating. So of course, we can't talk about social media and not mention influencers, defined as individuals with a presence on social media that have the ability to influence the behavior or opinions of others. Data suggests that nutrition influencer posts often lack scientific evidence and frequently promote a specific product or brand. Data also shows that social media users are often not likely to look into influencers' credentials or the accuracy of their posts. We also know that nutrition influencers are very good at building trust with their followers, often fitting conventional attractiveness and beauty standards, and effectively establishing credibility with their audience, even if they do not have formal credentials or qualifications. And last but not least, we're also exposed to content from people we know in our various circles, and we also contribute to content, whether it's posts, likes, comments, reshares, etc. Okay, so now to add another layer to our understanding. So thinking about the nutrition and health content you see on social media, how does it impact you? Your thoughts, your feelings, your actions? So I'm going to give you a little time to think about those, see what comes up, and please share in the chat if you feel comfortable. Okay, we'll go on to the next slide. I started brainstorming, and maybe this might help kind of trigger some of your thoughts too. We talked certainly about purchasing, spending, comparison. I'm seeing that in the chat, and yeah, I think we definitely can compare ourselves to the highlight reel that we see on social media, which can increase dissatisfaction that we feel with our bodies, our lives. It can affect our motivation, our behaviors, whether that's physical activity or eating, sometimes as far as possibly eating disorders, and certainly kind of overall health and well-being. We can think about how it impacts us there too. Yeah, and I think taking it with a grain of salt, that can be a good attitude and curiosity as well. And certainly I think it can be hard to determine sometimes how it's impacting us. Because it can be the cumulative effect of all that we're seeing and the interplay of how we maybe were already feeling before we opened the app. So we're going to take a look at the literature, but it's important that we continue to ask ourselves about our own individual experience. So I'm not going to go through this table, but I just put it on the slide to help illustrate that for even just one area of concern, there's a large number of both negative and positive impacts identified in the literature. So it's mixed, just like social media itself, not all good or all bad. And so these are two review studies on the next slide that I wanted to highlight. So the first in 18 to 30-year-olds, looking at engaging in social media, the review found it was associated with more body dissatisfaction, different eating behaviors such as dieting, restricting, overeating, choosing healthy foods, and the comparison kind of came up and how that might drive people to modify their body to try to receive validation on social media. And the second review study looked at 10 to 19-year-olds specifically in the literature. They found really no gender differences, that social media use was associated with body dissatisfaction, appearance investment, and body surveillance. And interestingly, passive use, so more just scrolling rather than really engaging with posts or likes, was associated with more depressed mood. So more of the evidence, as you can see, is kind of related to children, adolescents, and young adults, which is understandable when we think about who is using social media, who society is most concerned about, and who is sometimes the easiest to study. But maybe some concerning trends. So what's being done? Some social media platforms are choosing and or being pressured into making some policy changes. Pinterest, for example, now bans all weight loss ads. Twitter and now Instagram prevent weight loss advertisers from targeting people suffering with eating disorders. The FTC, on the next slide, also monitors egregious weight loss ads and provides education and a way for consumers to report fraudulent claims. And of course, this is an active area of research, especially how to mitigate potential negative impacts of social media on kids and adolescents. And one thing that's being studied is social media literacy. So we're going to take a look at one such framework. This is called SoMe Lit, and it came out in a paper this year. It emphasizes the dynamic role of the self in social media, as opposed to more traditional or mass media. So of course, in social media, there's that back and forth where the user is contributing, shaping, being shaped by, etc. So throughout this presentation so far, we've started some of this work towards social media literacy together. We've become more aware of our motivations, which is a critical first step in this framework. And we've started looking at different platforms and the policies and interventions or lack thereof. So on the next slide, and some of the economic interests that we know are at play. We've also worked on being able to evaluate the messages in our social media environment and to assess the realism of these messages. So how can we keep moving forward? I think with this awareness, we can move from a place of reaction to a place of intentional response. So some ideas. We can continue to be aware of our motivations to use social media. We can look at who we follow and what we see. Look at what we're posting and engaging with. Look at the source of the information we're seeing. And maybe also click on the article and read the full article. We can look at the credentials of the nutrition influencers we follow or other influencers in general. We can notice how we feel based on what we've consumed or engaged with. We can, of course, exercise our ability to shape the content that we see. We may consider unfollowing, blocking, muting content that isn't serving us. We can consider adding content to our feeds that shows diverse bodies. We may even consider taking a social media break. So overall, I'd say, be mindful of where social media use may be negatively impacting your health and well-being, and consider changes if you're not satisfied with how it's impacting you. And so with those thoughts, I'm going to pass it over to Brittany.
Hi, everyone. This is Brittany. Jenny, thank you for that. And now that Jenny's provided us with some, really great insight on the impact social media has on us and providing us with some research and statistics, I wanted to go into a little bit about a few popular, let's say, diets or ways of eating that are out there. I also wanted to hopefully provide you guys with some ideas and strategies on how to make healthy eating decisions yourself, as you leave this presentation and kind of go out. I had a few questions that I wanted to ask at first, and this is You can write in 1 or 2 words to answer this question in the chat. If you could, that would be great. The first question I had, and we've kind of covered this already with social media, but what factors may play a role in shaping a healthy diet? What do you all think would be some factors that you would think of? Social circle, availability, education, great. And yes, I agreed with all of those. As we're waiting for that, I did also list some points as well. So it's not all of them. Julie, if you want to hit the slide for that. But I did list a few here because the reason I listed these ones are that, you know, I think with social media, sometimes these might be neglected or maybe discredited, or we don't put enough thought into that. And these are really important points that we need to think about. Cravings, yes, age, enjoyment of the food in itself, cultural involvement, how that plays a role in shaping a healthy diet. You know, as a general outpatient here, I do meet with a lot of people who come to me and, you know, they simply ask, can you provide me with a plan? I need a plan, a healthy diet plan, or I need you to tell me exactly what to eat. And I understand that. I mean, for so many reasons, you might be overwhelmed, confused, or you're busy. You don't have time to think about nutrition, or you just don't care. You know, there could be a lot of reasons, but I cannot pass up these important points because I think in order to sustain a healthy diet and look at the long term, we have to think about some of these points. Okay, you can go on. On the next slide, with influences of food choices, one question I wanted to ask you all, and you can also write in the chat a 1 or 2 word answer, is when you think about your meal that you sit down and eat, or your food or your snack, what do you think is the main influence of that food choice? What is the number one based on research? Time, healthfulness. I like these: convenience, balance, availability, enjoyment. Well, actually, if you'll see from the responses I put up, Julie, if you want to hit that, taste is actually number 1. The ones that I put up are look to be matching some that you guys also have put up in the chat. And you should know that these are not all of them. I put down just a couple that I wanted to highlight, but yes, taste is number 1. We can't neglect this important piece. That, you know, there's just in my own practice, I do meet folks who maybe sometimes will feel like they need to fit into a certain diet or want to eat a certain food, but they don't really like it. And long term, that might be difficult. Mood, hunger level. An example of hunger level and how that influences our food choices. If, for instance, you've had a long work day, maybe you work a day shift, and your goal has been that you wanted to work on portion control or portion management for dinner, and or make healthier food choices for your dinner. But you're not equipping yourself best if every day you go home from work and you're ravenous, you're starving. So I think it is important for us not always to rely on what we say is self-discipline in this case, and maybe to actually have a plan set up. Does that mean have a larger lunch or more well-balanced lunch? Or does that mean actually having a snack in the car before you leave, so you're not going in feeling hangry? We're just better equipping ourselves for making those decisions. Going back to some general healthy eating basics, according to the USDA, I wanted to, so we're all on the same page in terms of this discussion. The USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, puts out some dietary guidelines for Americans every 5 years, and they update that. Here are some of the bulleted points that they put up on their website. emphasizes whole grains, plant foods, includes a variety of protein foods, is low in added sugar, sodium, saturated, and trans fat, and stays within calorie needs. Now, when you read this, you don't have to answer this, but I wanted to just kind of get you guys to ask some questions for yourself. Do you agree with the above guidelines? Do these guidelines actually help make you healthy decisions about your diet? And what else should we consider? Do we need to consider more? When I think of those bulleted points myself in my own diet, I may or may not agree with them. I feel like they're not very individual, and there's a lot of room for error or miscommunication. And so I think that's really important to remember. Can go on. We should also consider preferences. You can hit the next part as well. Desires and goals, our diet patterns that can be adapted and sustainable for you. And yeah, asking for assistance. So some of you I've noticed in the chat have put you're feeling confused. I get those questions a lot, and I completely understand that. There's lots of different conflicting news. So I want to provide you with some strategies on that. If you feel comfortable asking your provider, refer to a dietitian. Here at KEC, we're also here to help you with navigating some of that as well. So on the next two slides, this one and the next one, these are not necessarily diets or ways of eating I endorse, but I did in preparation for this presentation, I just Googled my, best diets of 2022. And this was one of the top articles that popped up, which I thought was kind of interesting in terms of what US News and World Report considers as best. On the next slide, I did most searched diets of 2021, and then an article on 2020 came up as most searched diets, which I thought was kind of interesting. I don't know how you all feel about it. Some of those many of you might recognize these ones, but military diet, cert food diet, I never have anybody ask me about those two diets, but the other ones are, maybe more common for you to hear. So what I wanted to do right now is take a moment to talk about 3 different ways of eating that I hear a lot about. So maybe this will provide you with some information. I'm going to talk about Mediterranean diet briefly. This is one of the most heavily researched ways of eating that you could find. What I, think is valuable to consider is that it can reduce risk of heart disease, certain types of cancers, diabetes, cognitive decline. It is a diet that emphasizes an abundance of plant foods. The principal fat used in cooking and within the food dishes is olive oil. And if you do eat meat, or you do decide to eat meat in this type of diet, it's usually leaner cuts, so fish and poultry, as opposed to less of the red meat. I personally, something that I do find that is beneficial to this approach is that it does allow all food groups. And I think that's something important to consider. And the principles of the diet can, in fact, be applied to other types of ways of eating or cultures. So maybe you don't feel like you eat a lot of the foods on the Mediterranean diet, but the principle of, eating more plant-based foods if you can, or striving for more leaner, let's say, protein options in your diet. Not all, but more of those might be a way towards acting like a Mediterranean diet. Okay. And then on the next slide, intermittent fasting. So this one focuses more on eating at a specific time rather than the focus on eating specific food types. There are different fasting approaches. Perhaps the most common that we hear about in maybe social media or in your social circles is a daily approach, which is, it can vary, but perhaps like a 16-hour fast, and then there's an 8-hour eating window. So what I'm concluding from this research is, it may be helpful for weight loss. The purpose may be for other reasons that somebody utilizes kind of an intermittent fasting protocol. There are claims and research to suggest that it may reduce cholesterol levels and blood pressure. More studies, though, are needed in order to state that it's a superior diet or a general healthy diet for most. What I would suggest and do is, look into these contraindications or possible contraindications that I have listed here. If you or a family or friend has a history of eating disorder or disorderly eating habits, this may not be a diet for you or way of eating for you. It's a possibility because of its restrictive nature. So those are some considerations. Also, what I do see in people who come to me is, maybe they have a work shift that changes day by day. Maybe they work a night shift and then a day shift. And that way of eating might be difficult to be consistent with, because one of the parts of this is a consistent schedule with the diet. Okay, and on to the next one is the ketogenic diet. Just briefly, it is a diet that's high in fat, low in carbohydrate, moderate to high in protein. There are various ketogenic diet therapies or diets that may, let's say, fall under this diet. But a true keto diet is very high in fat and low to moderate in protein. There are indications in research that it may decrease seizures frequency in people who have epilepsy. So, I don't know if that is relevant to you or not, but we do find that in research. It has been shown also that in short-term weight loss, this can be helpful and may be positively impactful with cholesterol levels. In the next page, if you want to go to the next slide, I do leave a quote here in one of the reviews from an article from Batch et al. In 2020. When they were looking at various randomized controlled trials and meta-analyses, they found that within the first 6 to 12 months of initiating ketogenic diet, decreases in blood pressure, triglycerides, and hemoglobin, as well as increase in HDL and weight loss may be observed. However, the aforementioned effects are generally not seen after 12 months of therapy. I'm not saying whether this is sustainable or not, but overall, reviews are suggesting that the sustainability of the diet might be more difficult than other ways of eating. Okay. So strategies to think about when you're making your own healthy diet choices. I think first off is we need to learn a little bit more for ourselves, and that might help decrease with the confusion. I think we're looking for simple answers often, and you may not have time to dedicate to that, but perhaps we need to prioritize the importance of learning ourselves. This may seem obvious, but research demonstrates that the more we know about nutrition ourselves and the foundation of nutrition, the better eating habits we actually have and the more confident we feel. So I have listed here some websites that might be helpful for you, but I know you might not go to those. I know that that might not be your first approach. So you are still going to be using social media, your friends and your family, as maybe that resonate well for you in terms of how you gain information. And so what do you do from there? Well, I think you check your sources, recognize that, as Jenny mentioned, there's a persuasive power of social media. Going into your favorite influencer or a blogger and really look at what the resources are and references. If you can't find any, then check and verify that diet or way of eating they're discussing with your provider or on a website. And I think that is a good approach. On the next slide, I listed a few other strategies to think about, which is being self-aware of restricted diets. You've probably heard me say this a few times today, the word restrictive. Now, some people need to, or based on the individual, that might be something to consider, but we also know that restrictive diets can lead to more preoccupied food thoughts. and negatively impact our memory and executive function. This is one of the words patience that I listed on the first slide here, is being patient with yourself and any food related behavior change. It takes us multiple instances for it to actually stick. So being aware of that and recognizing that, you know, we're going to mess up if we want to change something or have a goal, and that's okay. It's understanding that, you know, we do have to be patient and try different strategies on how to meet that goal, and make you, your preferences, culture, and background a priority. I think that's also important. So I kind of ran through those a little quickly, but, you know, on the last thing that I wanted to mention here and kind of a call to action was, Jenny and I would love for you to pick one or more thing we've talked about today for you to implement in your own life. You can share this in the chat if you want to. We would really appreciate that. But here are some ideas that are listed as well. Look at the credentials of a health influencer you follow. Fact check something a health influencer posts. Be patient with yourself when making healthy diet changes. Okay, I kind of breezed through that, but I do see some comments coming in. Fact checking. Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Julie, for helping us with this. And here are our references. If you guys needed those, you will have access to those. Appreciate y'all for being here.
Great. Thank you so much, Jenny. And thank you so much, Brittany, for this very informative presentation. And there's still comments coming in about fact checking and just checking, you know, their choices and different approaches and credentials, being patient. Thanks for that reminder. So thank you all for sharing. We have about 8 minutes for Q&A. So please put your questions in the chat or the Q&A. And I'll go ahead and kick it off with a few questions I've seen so far. So either Jenny or Brittany, are there some diets used to jumpstart weight loss or just simply a healthy diet? Do you want to speak to that?
I can, unless Jenny wants to go. It's a great question. You know, I think it really is variable depending on the person. Like I kind of honed in on here, I would love to be able to say you should follow this exact way of eating. But the reality is we all have very different lives. So I think you really have to understand that, you know, with your schedule, with how you cook, do you not cook? Where do you live? What is your family dynamics like? All of those things are important to consider. So if you wanted to, let's say, I don't know, maybe you were interested in learning more about Mediterranean diet or following that, I think first educating yourself on that. Or I also mentioned intermittent fasting. What if that's something that you've been learning a lot about and that may impact weight loss, but really you have to, it's going to be based on the individual and the person.
Great. Question on the keto diet. Is keto diet bad for cholesterol?
I'll let Brittany take that one too.
Some of the research suggests actually that, you know, so a keto diet, as a reminder, is a very low carbohydrate, very high fat diet. There is some review or randomized controlled trials that suggest it actually can be helpful, but particularly if those fat sources are coming from, there's a higher percentage of the fat coming from plant-derived sources. Additionally, those cholesterol levels, if a person is following maybe, let's say, more loosely and not integrating a lot of produce or plant-based sources, it can impact your cholesterol levels negatively. So it's you first educating yourself and really understanding how to approach it long term.
Great, thanks, Brittany. We have a couple of questions around, how healthy or safe is the keto diet? Would you recommend a Mediterranean diet for vegetarians?
Yeah, actually, Mediterranean diet can be it can be a vegetarian diet as well. So somebody who's following more of a Mediterranean diet approach, those principles can in fact be, taking out those meats and doing it more vegetarian based. And it can be, I think one of the questions was on lipids with, do you want to lower cholesterol with Mediterranean diet? I mean, it's been shown in research to be helpful and effective. So again, it comes back to the individual and if that appears to be an appropriate diet for them. But if I'm just basing on research, yes, it can be helpful for that.
Great. Question about the home delivery services. What are your thoughts on that? How healthy are they?
Yeah, I would say, as I think it was said in the question, they certainly can vary. I think it's nice when you have like the opportunity to choose your meals. You can certainly look for ones with more vegetables, or kind of add things in that maybe you otherwise wouldn't incorporate into your diet. And I think thinking too, like, what would it replace? If you didn't have that home delivery service, would you just be would you skip the meal? Would you just have, a snack, or just, a bar or something? Or is that kind of helping you get more of a balanced meal? Sit down with your family, prepare things together. So I think that's something to think about too.
Great thoughts. Do either one of you have a recommendation on resources that explain and summarize all these nutrition facts and diets for the general public, a reputable source?
Yes, I think some of the ones Brittany shared, especially the dietary guidelines, and those are, as she said, kind of put out every 5 years or so, and really take together all of the evidence, and kind of are put together in a clear way for the public. I don't know if Brittany, you have anything else?
Yeah, those websites also give pretty good information. If you want to look at the references, if that's not too much work for you, some of the reviews on the particular diets that were just mentioned, the reviews are more of, like, let's say, a summary that you could look at. And I think that might also be helpful for you to kind of direct you on where to go from there.
And we'll be sending this out so you have all the references. Okay, let's see here. This person's confused about low fat versus regular. We always hear things like low fat, very low fat. Do you have any recommendations on how to decipher the terminology?
Yeah, I think you definitely want to look at the type of fat. So certainly there are some kind of more plant-based or different types of fat, like, we think of avocados or certain oils or nuts and seeds, versus other types of fat that might be coming from more animal products or dairy, which would be the ones you might would want to limit more. But also with low fat products, kind of being mindful of what they might be adding to them for them to taste good. Like sometimes there will be a lot of added sugars to keep some of the taste or flavor when the fat's taken out. So just kind of considering some of those things too.
Great. Question on the intermittent fasting diet. Does it allow a person to eat whatever they want and in unlimited quantities, as long as it's consumed during that strict period of time?
That's a great question. Because there's some protocols that don't really specify that. But yes, general rule of thumb is you still have to be careful, I guess, with what you're eating. I mean, you can't just it wouldn't necessarily be recommended to have all fast food during that time. But the principle, the idea of that diet is that there is this fasting period of time. And then during that window of time, general healthy suggestions are recommended.
Great. A few more questions. What would you recommend, if anything, for rapid weight loss for obesity?
I think that's going to be individual based. I really do. If they're getting ready for a surgery, like it's pertinent, I mean, possibly. If somebody is just wanting rapid weight loss, I would really have to get to know the individual more in terms of the reason for that. Because the question is the sustainability and what your weight will do after that, however length of time this rapid weight loss is.
Do you recommend replacing a meal with a smoothie or juice? What are your thoughts on that?
Jenny, you okay if I take it? I think it can be done, yes. However, if we look at this idea of satiation and fullness, satiation is your feeling of fullness. If you are one who enjoys solid foods and enjoys meals, you tend to get more volume on less calories with solid food. However, some people love the smoothies. And so I think it's really important to understand what you're actually putting in that smoothie. And if it's a meal replacement, what the ingredients are. It is easy to go overboard and put a lot of calories into a smoothie and without filling you up. And it also can be the reverse feeling of that too. So the components of that are important. And then I wouldn't necessarily suggest it for every meal unless you need to because of a medical condition or because that's what you tolerate.
And a question about water. Does lack of water intake contraindicate nutrition and exercise progress?
Nutrition and exercise process. Jenny, you want to go?
I would definitely say, I mean, being hydrated is so important for so many body functions. I'm not sure I completely understand exactly what's being asked, but certainly staying hydrated, you can't go wrong. Yeah.
It could, you know, if a person is lacking water, it can lead to us feeling hungry and increase our hunger cues. So if your goal is that you want to, I don't know, maybe you want to lose weight or you're having challenges with digestion. And if you're not getting enough water, it can make you feel possibly hungrier and or having increased chances of problems with gastrointestinal challenges like constipation.
Great. And just one last comment. We're getting several comments around resources and programs for weight loss and nutrition for USC employees. Do you want to speak to the services you provide?
Sure. I am, you know, there's actually a good amount of dietitians here at Keck. I'm one of the general outpatient dietitians, so there are a few outpatient dietitians located in various departments here. But if you wanted to see a general outpatient for a variety of reasons, you would just need a referral order from a provider. So whether that's a provider from Keck or an outside provider, we can do both. It just depends on insurance coverage. If you're going through a specific program or you have a specific medical condition, there are also some outpatient dietitians in specific focus areas.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brittany and Jenny, for answering these questions. Just wanted to show a preview of next week, April 7th. Quick and healthy meals for busy schedules presented by Lindsay Pine and Michelle Smith. So please make sure you join us for that. And those of you who are participating and earning vitality points at the end of the series, you'll be contacted. If you have any questions, you can go to healthplans@usc.edu, but you'll be earning your points in your account. And then finally, we will be sending out a survey to collect feedback about today's presentation, as well as all the resources and presentations and handouts from today. So with that, we just have a few seconds left. I wanted to go to the raffle. We are raffling off 2 bento lunch boxes. And again, as a reminder for those of you attending all 8 sessions, we'll have a raffle at the very end of the series. So Suzanne, if you want to pull up the wheel here, we are going to spin the wheel. And let's see who the lucky winners are for today. Connie Park. Congratulations, Connie. We'll be in touch with you to send you your raffle prize. And our next winner is Iris Lynn. Congratulations, Iris. Well, thank you everyone for being part of Healthy Habits Eat Well. We'll see you all next week.
Thank you.